Xenoblade Chronicles 3 has become one of my personal favourite games of all time. Not just for things like its story and cast of characters, but really for all of the little touches that make a world so much more immersive. The scenery, the music, side questing, but also the combat. It wasn't that far into my first playthrough that I came up with this idea I'm about to show you, where we can take this game's already diverse combat system to something even more incredible that doesn't just take combat, but will involve nearly every aspect of this game. To begin with, we need to create some rules. The premise of this run is based around the class system. In Xenoblade Chronicles 3, each of the party members that can join your group come with a different style of combat known as a class. And my overall idea for this run is that anytime a party member is reduced to 0 HP, they lose access to whatever class they are currently using. So if Noah here goes down while using his Sword Fighter class, he can no longer use the Sword Fighter class for the entire game. If one of our party members runs out of classes to use, then the run is over. If this ends up being way too difficult, then we'll figure it out later, as I still really want to make a video out of this for content in some way. Now, there are a number of other little rules and clarifications that I will need to explain for this run, but since some of these rules get a bit too detailed for a nice introductory segment, I've actually decided that it would be better to explain some of the rules as and when the game's features are introduced. I'm sorry that this will bother some people, as it probably would for me too, but please just trust me that I'm not avoiding any rules, I'm simply trying to not complicate things. Consider it like how a number of games give you tutorials gradually through the game, rather than all at once. There is one clarification I can make though, which is that I'm going to play this run on hard difficulty. Having only played on normal, this adds more challenge. We don't unlock the class system for a few hours in the game, so we don't need any more specific rules until we get there. What we do have to bear in mind, however, is that at the start, everyone is still technically using a class, and we don't have any alternate classes to switch to if we lose one. This means that if anyone dies, the run ends immediately. So allow me to present to you the simplest and yet most intense start to any challenge run you have ever seen. Let us begin the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 Nuzlocke. We begin in a serene town square. The birds are singing, the children are playing, the world is wait. Some wacky interdimensional space things happen, and we are suddenly transported to the world of Ionios. We then see a great battlefield and are introduced to the two main opposing forces, Xenoblade 1 fans and Xenoblade 2 fans. Armies of Twitter and Reddit users ravenously devour their prey, only to find a new opponent standing before them, all in the name of serving their nation's queen. I wrote that line as a joke, but some people actually do this. Why? We then see our initial starting group and are thrust into the midst of battle. Now, a moment ago, I told you this was going to be an intense start to the run. Please recall that we currently can't change classes in any way, which means that if any one of our party members goes down, we instantly lose. But this is the tutorial, what's the worst that can happen? We'll get through easily. But as I began to see our health bars slowly tick down, I realized that I had no control whatsoever on healing. Yuni is our only healer, and we don't have any master arts right now, so our run rests entirely on her. But what's more, we can't switch over to her. So not only does our run rest solely on Yuni, it rests solely on Yuni's AI. Now, if you are like me and you like this series of games, then I'm sure you can agree. Let's just say, these games are not praised for the quality of their AI. And what's worse, since we can only use features that have been introduced to us, there is nothing else I can do in this first battle but sit and watch as we auto-attack and hope that Yuni heals us. But this is the tutorial, it's fine, right? Well, that's what I thought, but that started to change when I saw that there was a distinct gap in Lance's HP. And then his health bar turned orange, and it kept going down. There was no sign of stopping. Would the run end here? We did win this fight, but Lance survived with only a third of his full HP, which, for the first fight of the game, made me reconsider a few things. I literally didn't move for a few seconds to ensure Lance would have full HP for the next fight. Out of curiosity, I then tried to go away from the objective to see what happened, and to absolutely no one's surprise, you can't, just in case you wanted to know. The next fight in this tutorial initially looks easier as you face the same enemies, but there's only 2 instead of 3. The catch is that afterwards 3 more enemies appear, and because this is the same fight, there's no time in between to auto-heal. Fortunately, the first 2 enemies give us a level up, as well as suddenly learning how to use arts. As long as we use the arts correctly, this should allow us to do damage a bit faster. Of particular note in Noah's arts is Ground Beat, which is an AoE attack. Upon using this, we hit all the enemies, and so the enemies that we're not targeting begin to aggro Noah, since he's done the most damage to them. And normally, this is kinda bad because we don't want our attackers to have aggro, but in this case, it demonstrates a purpose that could be crucial to the entire run. Any damage that Noah is taking is damage that Lance isn't. That sounds obvious, but the point is that Lance is now slightly less in danger of going down, and that's the whole crux of the game here. It might be better for us to spread out damage across a few party members rather than focus on 1 or 2 specific defenders. But of course, we still have to manage HP on everyone, and defenders do have the most HP. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that aggro management becomes a lot more critical. If we were to purposefully aggro enemies to non-defenders, even just briefly, it could save our defenders from going down, and therefore an entire class. But that's for later. Right now we are ground beating and sword striking and edge thrusting. I'm retracting that one. Thanks to Noah and Uni taking a little bit of damage, Lance only gets down to half HP in this fight. The third and final battle is genuinely easier, having only 1 enemy, then 2. After this, we have a cutscene where we stand around and talk and somehow don't die, until eventually we keep going to find this thing, the Ulula. Fortunately, we've unlocked talent arts now, and since we're gaming experts, we can perform break, topple and daze without having seen the tutorial. At first, this fight was pretty straightforward. Lance was losing a little bit of HP, but so was the enemy. But I then realized that the rate of HP loss was pretty much the same for both of them. If the fight continued this way, it was going to be really close as to whether Lance survived. Now, remember what I said a minute ago about aggro and spreading out damage? Well, here is where I learned that none of that applies when talking about enemy AoE attacks. When the enemy deals AoE damage, it doesn't matter who they're aggroed to at all, because the damage applies to everyone in a certain radius. So in this case, we want everyone to be spread out on the field. Right here, Uni and Lance both get hit, which literally halved Uni's HP. An auto attack then put Lance into red HP for the first time. Uni healed, but Mouth Laser did another 100 damage. It was down to the wire with Lance surviving on only 49 HP. He could maybe have survived 1 more auto attack, but that's not accounting for increased damage such as arts or critical hits. We won against Colony Sigma, but came so close to defeat. This opening segment does an amazing job at giving a simple yet effective overview of what the world of Ionios is like. And in the scene after this fight, I realized that's what had just happened with this run. The idea that we'd come so close to failure in the opening tutorial made me question how much further we'd really get. I realized this challenge would be much more brutal than I ever imagined. This is the first time I've ever attempted something like this, and I actually realized that it helps you to better empathize with all of these characters. Typically, when you lose a fight in a game, it's disappointing, but I just tried again or went to do something else. In this run, even just 1 party member dying is meaningful. It changes the rest of the whole game. And that's the same as what happens here. These people don't get to just retry the fight. If they die, it's over. In this moment right here, I came up with the idea that anytime we lose a class in this run, we could honor it with the flute melody in the same way as the Off-Seers send off the Fallen. I don't have a specific idea in mind at this point, but I want to commit to doing something. Once the off-seeing is complete, we begin the trek back to our home of Colony 9. It is at this point that I wish to introduce the first clarification of our rule set. And that is, if you try this challenge at home, don't just grind to level 99 in the first area. It removes the challenge, blah blah blah. I'm sure I don't need to explain myself. That said, if you do stay in this one area and actually grind all the way to level 99, I think you deserve a free pass. To a doctor, that is. On our way back through Everblight Plain, I did enough battles to get up to level 4 and also saw this enemy called the Run Ender, which I decided to avoid. Then we had a forced battle which taught us about Uni's healing ring. This is her art which plants a regenerate ring on the field. On the one hand, this is great because she won't use this art until we reach this tutorial, so now she has a second healing art to use. On the other hand, it's completely useless because Mr. Meatbrain over here doesn't seem to have enough brain cells to comprehend what a healing ring is. Fortunately, once we took down one enemy, the fight became much easier. As with most RPGs, the game takes the first walk home to introduce some key gaming concepts. And here we are introduced to two more. The first is containers, which for gameplay purposes function as treasure chests. Now, just to consider the plot explanation, these are supplies that were either forgotten or abandoned by some other soldiers. This one makes sense, as we just finished a battle and it's on the way back to the colony. But some of these containers are in the strangest of places, and I just have to ask, who put these here in the first place? To demonstrate just how silly all these soldiers are for leaving containers everywhere, we are going to begin keeping a container counter, and when we finish the run, we'll blame all of them on the person I deem to be the worst NPC. So here's container number 1. This gives us our first accessory, and it's actually pretty nice, boosting our auto attack by 58%. The second feature we're introduced to here is one I really can't joke about. Around the world, we can find the remaining husks of dead soldiers that haven't been sent off. This feature is just so haunting and is another way in which this opening section allows you to experience the reality of the world. To show just how brutal this is, I am also going to be keeping a counter of how many husks we see off in our playthrough. This won't include any husks from cutscenes in the main story, like the earlier scene. This is instead only counting husks we find in the wild. Now, just to be clear with these counters, I probably won't be narrating every single time we find one of these things because it will get boring and repetitive, but I will show them all on screen, even if just briefly. In the next area, I took down a few more enemies and then had a really close call with 2 light skeeters. Lan survived with only 53 HP, so I made sure to stay away from any more of those enemies for now. Fortunately, none of the other fights came anywhere close, so I was starting to get a little more confident. Then, when we reached Colony 9, I saw a container up on this cliff which I decided was our number 1 priority. This led to a battle with 3 of the aforementioned deadly skeeters, which almost immediately resulted in Noah's death. The only thing that saved us was a level up which refilled our HP. I realised that the earlier encounter with the skeeters was just a warning sent from the gods above, and that we should learn never to be greedy for containers again. I then completely ignored that and went to get another container. We then finally enter Colony 9, get a tutorial I should apply to real life, have the obligatory awkward bath scene, go to sleep, get woken up, and have to go to an emergency assembly. The main Phoronis now opens up, allowing us to get 2 more containers. We're then told that we have to investigate a mysterious energy source in Alfeto Valley. This will be a very dangerous mission, which means it's time for the equipment tutorials. Despite my best efforts, we are forced into doing some shopping and buy Noah a bronze temple guard. This increases his health, but forces us to replace the previous accessory which boosted damage. I thought the damage was better, so I decided to swap them back. I also noticed our other party members didn't have any accessories, so I gave Lance the health boost, Uni got the feather band because there was nothing better, and Wamble already had a feather band which I definitely didn't equip, so this is his default accessory, which is weird? We then talk to Rold, who needs some materials, and get introduced to Collectopedia cards, which are basically bad quests. We get the goods, he gives us the money, and then promptly leaves to hide the evidence. Then we get a tutorial on arts, which is good because it allows us to swap some out. We're forced to swap Ground Beat for Air Slash, but that's fine because it's better. I then decided to swap out Uni's Power Ring for Vortex. This means we no longer get the Attack Up Field Ring, but in return we get another healing art, which at the moment is much better for us. On lands, I swapped Crash out for Variable Turret. This gives him a more defensive art, which normally I don't like so much, but in this instance I think it works much better. And on Wamba, I changed absolutely nothing. And finally, we head out towards our mission. Questing. Instead of just heading straight for the story objective, we need to do some more preparations, considering we nearly died due to literal insects. The first is right at the gate from Pollux, who tells us there's a supply drop somewhere in the area we can claim as our own. To get to the other quests, we need to go this way. But there was a big scary unique monster, so I went this way. But there were some other big scary monsters, so I went this way, and eventually I found Lenny. Lenny asks if we can see off his friends who didn't make it out of a battle with some bunnets. Bunnets are one of the great early game evils of Xenoblade, so of course we understand his pain and we will do what we can to avenge them. The bunnets were actually quite a tough battle because they were taking a lot of aggro from Uni. There were multiple times where she almost died, but I'm sure she would prefer to say that she's just teasing me. We then get to send off the other soldiers, and since this is our first instance of a group of husks, I want to be clear that the counter at the corner is including each one of the husks in a group. In this case there are 3 husks, so the counter goes up by 3. After returning to Lenny, we then press on to the supply drop, and there was also a container in the area, and I had to be extremely restrained in order to not risk us fighting a tough enemy. Remember kids, the quest for greed and prosperity may result in death. Finally, we find Lorea, who tells us there is a missing group of soldiers. I wasn't sure if we could handle the enemies in this quest, so I left it alone for now, but I still discovered the relevant area as it gives us a little bit of XP. Once again, I then spotted a shiny container which I shouldn't have gone for, but did so anyway. The reason this one was a problem is because there's a bit of a gap which we have to jump over. I'm counting full damage as a character dying and therefore losing a class. Editor's note. I know there is water here, so I don't know entirely why I was talking about full damage, but there are still 2 things to consider. Firstly, the water might be shallow, in which case we still take full damage. Secondly, the water contains some level 50 enemies, so we are still very much dead if we miss the jump. On with the video. So if we miss this jump, the run is pretty much over. So, it's time for some dramatic pause whilst you contemplate whether or not I made this jump. The container gave Uni a much better accessory to boost her healing rather than this fairly useless one. After doing another, I decided to try and grind up to level 7. One of these fights against 2 Crustips began to go a bit south and I quickly contemplated what to do. It was at this moment that I suddenly remembered an incredible power that we possessed that we have not yet used in this run. Something that only veterans of RPG adventure can truly tell the story of. Behold, the key phrase that will unlock our true power, given on high from the heavens above. Whenever you are in danger, you must recite these 6 words. Running away is a valid tactic. Sorry, what was that? Running away is a valid tactic. If you don't know, this is an actual tutorial you get in Xenoblade Chronicles 1, and can we just talk about this? The explicit words used are valid and tactic. That's right, the official developers of this game are plainly stating they are very happy to consider your personal choice not to use this gaming feature as a perfectly acceptable and respectable opinion. And not just that, but they admire your thinking. Some may call us cowards, they may call us weak, but we will hold our pride forever knowing that our flimsy excuse for a battle plan is officially recognized by the highest judge of all as a valid tactic. Upon saying the key phrase, Noah and friends proceed to do a little skedaddle and manage to get out in one piece. So we then find some different enemies and eventually get to level 7. Since we've done as much of the questing as I wanted to, we are now ready to continue forward into Alfeto Valley. Here we have a forced battle against some Volf. They didn't do too much damage overall, but the main problem is that they were targeting Uni a lot, which is very dangerous. Luckily we had a few generic unnamed NPCs helping us out. Do they actually do any damage? And we won the fight. This guy says a funny, and we begin our trek through Alfeto Valley. I started off by going for a few more enemies, and then had a bad time with a few more Volf. I spoke the divine phrase and probably switched my strategy with Noah to performing some evasive maneuvers. Then land started to get low, and for some reason, instead of actually running away, I just stuck it out and hoped I won, which I did, barely. I realised that there weren't that many more enemies before the next cutscene, so instead of trying to get to level 8, I just went to progress the objective. And this, my friends, is where we have a problem. A surprise boss battle in the Drift Ouroboros. Well, how bad can it be? We start off with a Daze combo and generally just do things the same as before. He then has this move called Cursed Cuisine, which is a move I will never forget from this game. He jumps forward, deals big damage, and given the move contains cuisine in its name, I can only assume that something of cuisinian nature is occurring. Not only does this deal big damage, it deals AoE damage and moves him pretty far, which messes up Noah's positioning. Then it happens a second time, which in itself is pretty scary, but this time, the cuisine contains dessert. So at this point, the run is technically over? Of course, I wanted to keep going, so I thought I'd just get through the fight and come up with a plan afterwards. Except then... we were getting close to winning the fight, but I knew something needed to change here. So before we continue, let me explain my thought process. Technically, we've lost the run. Remember that we are technically using classes, and since we can't change them, we have technically run out of classes to use. But I wanted to make a whole video series out of this for the sake of content, and I don't want to let the content end here just because of some insert enemy insult here. Since we're so early into the game, restarting the run would basically just yield the same outcome, so I decided to keep going on this save file. However, we still absolutely deem these classes to be lost, and there will be some form of punishment for it later in the run. What I do want to commit to though, is trying to beat this fight, quote, legitimately. I want to beat this fight without any of our party members dying, so that we have at least experienced how the run should have been, and what it would have taken to get there. If we just keep going as we are, then the first chapter of the game becomes a lot less exciting. So to summarize, we lost, but we're continuing, but we are going to do this genuinely first so we can kind of say we did it. Some of you may be thinking this is just a pathetic excuse to keep making this video, but I would prefer to call it a valid tactic. So, our goal is to beat this enemy. No, you know what? We'll give this thing a name. Herbert. That is the first thing that popped into my head, so Herbert it is. Our goal is to beat Herbert. What I did not realize is that Herbert would be a little bit of a challenge. Please enjoy my summary of the Herbert Chronicles. Attempt 2. Initially I just tried to fight again because we weren't that far off the first time, and of course we still lost. Attempt 3. This is where I noticed that RNG, both of the enemy and our party, really had a big factor in this fight. Herbert killed Uni halfway through, which means restart. So at this point I realised we needed to improve ourselves, and I went to grind to level 8. I also realised that we get class rank ups even though we haven't been taught about them yet, and that if we get our characters to class level 10 they will upgrade our arts, so that was now my main priority. I took out enemy after enemy after enemy and utterly destroyed the ecosystem in this nearby area. We also took out our first elite enemy, which really wasn't that bad, which makes me a bit more confident to take them on in future, which is probably a mistake. And after doing this, we rank up Noah's Arts, which basically means they do more damage and have less recharge. Attempt 4 was exactly the same, but I put it down to being rusty after grinding. Attempt 5, this one was so close, but unfortunately our tank just needed to be a bit meatier. Attempt 6, failed. Attempt 7, failed. At this point, I decided to rethink our arts. Uni couldn't do anything better, but on lands I swapped uppercut slash for solid stance. This improved his defense, but since I removed a key art for gaining aggro, attempt 8, Noah gained the aggro and got cooked. So this time I swapped off variable turret for uppercut slash again. Attempt 9. At this point, Uni was getting bored and decided not to daze, so I restarted manually. Attempt 10. Uni didn't daze again, which started to really concern me, and I wondered if this was actually a signal that my love for her is really unrequited. My last hope was to change Moebius arts to see if he can use his legendary power to save us. But they were best as they already were. I took back to the Yzana plains and ended my play session by defeating a couple more innocent bystanders. After this, I got a little distracted in my life by playing some other pretty cool games and didn't end up playing on this save file again for about a month. Some might call this procrastination, but I would instead argue that I was merely resting my soul, replenishing my energy, so that one day we could return and claim victory over Herbert. And in my slumber, I was eventually revived by one thought that had not crossed my mind thus far. One final tool that could give us a chance. The expansion pass. That's right folks, this run just officially became pay to win. While the later packs of the DLC are packed with cool new content, the first wave is simply some extra items and accessories. But in this limited, early section of the game, these accessories are our true saviour. These are what we need to truly become a bit meatier. There are probably a few options that work from these items, but this is what I decided to go with. Noah took the Nop-On Strap, a 10% chance to keep an Art's recharge. We had to remove the auto attack boost, but overall I think this is better value. Uni had to lose her accessory that boosted healing, but instead got another accessory that boosts healing differently. I don't actually know which one of these is better, but I went with the newer one because bigger number activate brain neurons. On lands, we were able to upgrade our 20% HP boost to 25%. Some of these gains might sound small, but given our fights with Herbert have been fairly close thus far, this should hopefully give us the edge we need. As a final precaution, I got us up to level 9, which also served as a way to test the new setup. Doing this also got lands in Uni up to class level 10, which means their arts are now upgraded as well. With all this done, we trekked the short path before us, knowing that this fight was to be the end of it all. The fate of the run would be decided here. Win or lose, to face our destiny. Our reward for defeating Herbert is a cutscene with the legendary Mwamba. Here we learn that Mwamba is only a month away from his homecoming. He then goes on ahead to help with another group, and so our party is reduced to 3. It's a good job this happens after the Herbert fight, or else we may have never passed this boss. Bearing in mind that Herbert isn't even really a story boss, he's one of those filler bosses with no intended character. Anyway, we can now finally move on with the story. Remember the whole urgent mission thing? Apparently there's a threat even greater than Herbert that we need to deal with. Whilst we're here, it would be good to do a few more random battles just to try and level up and... Uni! Next, we find the rest of our fellow colony soldiers, who at any moment could have decided to check why we hadn't arrived for several hours and come back to help us defeat Herbert. Instead, we will have to take solace by the campfire. Campfires, also known as rest spots, are very cool. At this point, we only have a couple of features available to us, but we have a very important one: leveling up. Throughout the game, we can get bonus EXP by doing stuff. We can use the bonus XP to level up our party separately from the XP earned in battle. It's actually a very nice system because it allows you to have a little more control over your party's level, either if you want to go higher or if you want to keep it lower for more challenge. In this tutorial, we're forced to bring everyone to level 10, but that's perfectly fine for us. And just like that, we are level 10. After a quick mission review, we press on. Using our epic iris technology, we can see that there are now Agnian troops in the area. However, we can't see our main target due to the black fog interfering with the iris. We move in closer, and the Keves and Agnian forces begin shooting what appears to be an invisible ship. We now have to make a trek down through the valley to where the craft crash landed. Along the way, there are lots of enemies to fight. Some are regular monsters, but some enemy Agnian forces. A couple of these battles are forced, but they don't cause any trouble. We get an intermissary scene where we have definitive proof that, despite being the equivalent of 18 years old, our party have been raised as a bunch of trained killing machines. There's then this odd skirmish where we can choose whether to aid Keves or Agnes, but really we can only aid Keves. The illusion of choice at its finest. And just for the record, in this short trek through Alfeto Valley, we have killed a total of 19 Agnian soldiers, not because they are our main objective, but just because they're here. Agnes equals bad, stealing life equals good, and that's the way of the world. There were also a couple of Levnesses, but I'm not counting those as killing exactly because they're robots and therefore are not sentient. Uh-oh, someone didn't like my suggestion that robots are not sentient, and now we have to fight some robots. These robots, however, are not Kevesi or Agnian, and are in fact related to the mysterious object we are searching for. This was a little bit precarious when there were 2 of them, but once there was only 1 left, it was no problem. Same goes for the few others we took down on the way to the next scene. During said next scene, we see some other humans that appear to be from neither Keves nor Agnes. The mysterious object is some kind of magic stone that the unknown humans are trying to protect. Noah goes to take a closer look, and we are suddenly ambushed by sentient origami. This turns into a trio of enemy Agnian soldiers, one wielding twin rings, one wielding a big hammer, and one wielding said origami, which is so damn cool. Conveniently, each one represents a role: attacker, defender, and healer. I decided to go for the textbook option of dealing with the healer first. Uni took this as a personal insult and decided not to cooperate. As with the Herbert fight, I want to do this legitimately, so I restarted. This time I focused on the attacker first, to limit the amount of damage being dealt. I should also mention that at this point I was starting to have some strange connection issues with my right Joy-Con, #Joy-Cons are based, which meant that some of my button inputs weren't registering, and this will persist for the remainder of the video, so please bear that in mind. Regardless of this, our new targeting strategy let us win the fight on the second try. The helmet masks are broken, allowing us to see the 3 characters in all their glory, and for the sake of convenience I will reveal that their names are Mio, Senna, and Tyon. A battle ensues which seems to be fairly evenly matched until Noah suddenly remembers that he is intelligent. He realises that Mio's attacks have a rhythm, which he then exploits in order to take the advantage. To then truly prove that he is a JRPG protagonist, Noah initiates a coherent conversation whilst deep in combat. Our attention is then turned to the mysterious man, whose name by the way is Guernica Van Damme, but the party don't know this yet, who proceeds to be an absolute beast by firing his gun into the sky and pinning down both Noah and Mio. He summarises his opinion in one crucial line.
Think about your real target. That thing!
The parties became so focused on fighting one another that they forgot about their real objective. When Guernica asks why they are fighting, both sides think it's fairly obvious: to defeat their enemy. But Noah, being the awesome philosopher that he is, sees through this.
It'll never replace the friends we've lost. That's why.
We aren't fighting because we want to.
We're not.
We can see our lives written before our eyes. Fighting is all we have. Is it any wonder we lose loved ones? Or have to take them from others? All of us. We have to fight so we can go on living.
Guernica sees that Noah is no ordinary soldier, and he entrusts them with the answer.
Because the face of your real enemy is...
Or he would if we wanted to prevent the rest of the game's story. Suddenly, a big red beast appears, carrying an Agnian soldier named Hacked, as well as Mwamba. Guernica, who actually survived that blast, names the creature as Moebius. Moebius then does the unthinkable.
All right.
This instills rage in both parties, who begin to launch their attacks. As the party begin to fight this enemy, Guernica, who is still alive, manages not only to climb into this machine, but fully operate it and land a blow on the enemy. But sadly, he is then tossed aside and... Wait, he's still alive?
Well, crud. Hell of a throwing arm.
This man got impaled in the chest, tossed several meters in a machine, and should absolutely be bleeding to death, but he is still able to make loose, joking remarks. Huge respect. Noah jumps in to save Guernica, and the boss fight begins. The good news is that the Agnian trio are actually helping out in this fight, albeit not as part of our party. The bad news is that Mr. Mysterious Enemy has some very scary art names, including He is also the first enemy we have encountered to have an enraged status. This means that when his health bar passes the big fiery mark, he becomes angry and is not very nice. Initially, this fight went fairly well, with Noah taking a little bit of aggro to spread out the damage, and Lance doing pretty solid with his HP. However, this enraged status proved to be a problem, as Lance died. Listen, at this point all three of them have died several times over, so this doesn't feel like a huge loss. But again, we are doing this legitimately, and so I restarted the fight. Just between you and me, I am certain that this creature has some sort of fond relation to Herbert. In fact, I like to believe that when an enemy becomes enraged, the ghost spirit of Herbert lends its power to the enemy so that they can become strong enough to defeat us. Now, please do bear in mind, I was having some minor difficulties with my controller, but that definitely wasn't enough to change the outcome of the fight. Some of these fights were definitely based on RNG to do with break. Sometimes the enemy can resist a break, meaning that we can't start a topple daze combo. Our fifth attempt was much closer, but again, could be based on RNG. I did notice, however, that after the previous fight with the Agnian trio, we were extremely close to level 11. I instead used the give up option to go back and defeat one more of the automatons from before. Although level ups are not a game changer, it could give us the edge we need to win. However, when going back into the fight, bearing in mind that we are re-entering the boss arena and not just restarting, we can see that Mysterious Enemy and the Agnian trio are already fighting in the distance. And when we enter, his health bar is already slightly depleted, specifically about 10%. This is a huge advantage to us, and so I went in with a newfound confidence. This clearly didn't help my strategy, as we somehow managed to lose the fight with more enemy HP remaining than usual. But in seeing that it was possible to start the fight with less HP, I decided to experiment. On the next try, I waited several minutes before going in to see whether it made a difference. Unfortunately, the amount of HP remained the same. A second question had also crossed my mind about trying to return to Colony 9. You're never supposed to be in this situation, so I was curious to see if anything was programmed. Turns out that all of these battles against Agnian soldiers respawn, which I guess means we've actually increased our kill counter by 6. When I returned to the boss fight, I took another look at our arts. I decided to swap Uppercut Slash for Variable Turret to give Lance a more defensive setup. This does remove his aggro gaining art, which was a real problem when we tried it on Herbert, but I thought that if I could control myself as Noah, this could work out. At one level, it was working, because even if Noah gained the aggro, it was only brief, and we've already discussed that it's good for Noah to take a couple of hits here and there. The problem was that controlling Noah's aggro means controlling his arts, which means we were doing significantly less damage. But if you are faithful and patient, then you will be rewarded. On my fourth attempt with the new art setup, I waited about 90 seconds before entering the fight, which was enough to hit the cap. We started off strong with a daze combo and hit 25% with minimal damage taken. After using an overclock buster, we got a bit too much aggro and it looked like Noah was going down. Another daze combo was enough to stall out, but no healing from Uni. The enemy now became enraged, and although the aggro had moved, an AoE attack put Noah in a delicate balance. Now Lance was getting low, and soon both Noah and Lance were at their limit. But thanks to a perfect heal from Uni, as well as some incredible gaming skill, we were able to overcome the Mysterious Enemy. It took 13 attempts and just over an hour of perseverance, but we never lost hope and eventually found a way. In the cutscene after, we see Guernica, who is still alive, bashing on the stone and trying to make it work. At the perfect moment, he presses the button. And in that instant, the world changed forever.
An Off-Seer? Really? Miyabi? This is all such a waste.
Mio, is that why you're here? For recognition?
Mio, I was just looking for a training partner.
You've nothing to apologize.
Mio, Yzana,
Take this. I'm giving you my whole self. So please, live life in my stead.
For now, just run! Run with all the breath you have!
We can take care of ourselves!
Stop crying, Lance! It won't change anything!
Euron! Euron!
This is one of my favourite scenes in the entire game, and so I could not resist showing it again here. Noah and Mio have merged into an epic purple being, which has no better introduction than from Mr. Moebius.
Well, you sure catch on quick. So, you've got yourselves an interlink going, huh? Guess I've got to give the old fool credit where it's due.
Interlink?
Well, whatever. That form you just merged into, it's called Ouroboros. See that into your skulls.
Ouroboros?
Oh, and me, I'm Moebius. We look a bit alike, don't we? When Keves and Agnes come together in unity, you're practically one step away from being on the same level as us.
So we're...
One being.
To put it bluntly, you're failures. Fact is, the two of us are mortal enemies.
Enemies?
You got the picture? No further questions? Then let's get back on the dance floor!
This next bit isn't shown on screen, but I'm sure we can all agree that suddenly, Moebius reveals that he brought a bunch of backing singers with him to provide the only thing that could ever surpass the Ouroboros form. Ace. In this fight, we now have access to Noah and Mio's Ouroboros form, which gives us some very powerful attacks, and, in this particular fight, immune to Moebius' damage. The only problem with this fight was his AoE damage, which nearly killed Uni a couple of times. But beyond that, it was an easy win on our first try. Mr. Moebius then concedes defeat before shining a big infinity symbol in the sky. We see lots of other mysterious people, and then he disappears. In the aftermath, both parties are still wary of each other, and a little unsure what to do. Then Guernica, who is somehow still alive, this man is a beast, tells them not to fight. He says that the group of 6 is now Ouroboros, and shows us that we no longer have flame clocks in our irises. We also learn that Mio is toward the end of her 10th term, and that Guernica is in fact 60 years old. He tells the group to head to a place called Swordmarch, where we will find a city. And then he slowly fades away, finally resting his soul. The double off-seeing from Noah and Mio shows a more gentle way in which Keves and Agnes can work together. It gives a good bit of character to the Off-Seers, as Noah and Mio have more pushback on heading back to their colonies. Despite this, both groups then head home as normal, as if absolutely nothing happened. On our way back to Colony 9, we get the opportunity to play as Uni, which allows us to see just how good or bad Uni's AI really is. And it was at this point that I realised that Vortex doesn't do much healing because it can only do up to this maximum amount as the number shown next to healing power. I have never noticed this before, and I am stupid. So with this in mind, I decided to swap off Vortex for Power Ring, which gives an attack up field. This difference would probably have made the previous boss fights a lot easier, and I apologise for all of you who have been screaming at me this entire time. We also found 2 more husks on our way home, as well as reaching level 12. When we reach the entrance to Alfeto Valley, we spy some friendly colony soldiers, who turn out to actually be some not so friendly colony soldiers. For whatever reason, our own colony begins to attack us. We have a forced battle which has no problems whatsoever, but we have no choice but to turn back to Alfeto Valley. We then transition to Mio, Senna and Tyon, who are also having to run away from their own colony's soldiers. We actually get to take control of Mio to experience how to fight as a defender. We can also use all of the accessories we previously gained, even though we definitely shouldn't be able to. There were a number of enemies I could have fought, but since we're near a turning point for the run, I decided to just press on. The 2 enemy parties meet once again, and ultimately, thanks to Noah's leadership, decide it would be best to work together with a common goal of reaching the city that Guernica mentioned. Paean and Lanz are more against the idea, but you have to remember that this is all they know. I think there is a real message in this game about trying to think outside your own perception of the world, summarized perfectly in this interaction.
They're the enemy.
They were the enemy.
Everyone gets a nice introduction to each other, and we find some shiny new clothes. We've now finished the first chapter of the game, but be warned, this is not representative of how long the rest of the playthrough will be. At the start of the next chapter, we get a flashback to the incident where the Keves crew's friend Yoren was killed. A girl named Silvercoat Ethel saves the gang and is known as a famed hero in Keves, despite only being in her 3rd term. Now back to the present, and we are at the HQ of our new enemies. They all refer to each other by different letters, the one we previously fought being D, others including O, P, J, H, and then a really spooky one called Z. Eventually, K is asked to go and vanishes without a trace. Back to the main party, and we find Lanz and Senna attempting to fuse into the Ouroboros form, sensing some sort of connection between them, presumably because they realise that they share the same singular brain cell. Tensions are still high between the two groups, but we press on. We now have the ability to change character, both in the world and in battle. This could be very useful if we need to manually control important characters, like our healers or those in danger. We can also change the setup of the Agnian trio who join us to form a full party of 6. To be honest though, I was getting a bit lazy because I knew that the point I wanted to reach was just around the corner. There's not a whole lot I want to comment on in the next section, so I'll just summarise by saying, we enter Millick Meadows, set out for this old Feronis, get some practice in battling with 6 party members, and of course, run away from the big monkey. We then find another group of husks, and I realised that up until now, all of the husks we found have been Kevesi, whereas these husks are Agnian. The functionality of the feature is the same, but I thought it would be interesting if we split our husk counter separately into Agnian and Kevesi. I definitely won't find all of them in this playthrough, but it will be interesting to see if there is an overall difference. We then encounter a skirmish between 2 groups of enemies, the Crustips and the Brogs. Aiding the Brogs will give us a Nopon coin, which is very good for later in the game. I have a personal history with Nopon coins, which I will share when the time is right, but that time is not now. With the power of the Brogs on our side, we were sure to be no match for... When we reach the Feronis Hulk, we have to defeat the surrounding enemies. I was enjoying playing as Mio as I didn't have to care about gaining aggro, and also because she was now one of only 2 characters who has technically not failed to run, and so I wanted to try and keep her alive. The attempt went like this.
I should have done more.
Even in the moment, I could tell my brain was a bit switched off, and I basically just hoped all of the loving viewers would understand. I switched over to the one and only girl with the gall, as she is now the only legal party member in our group. I tried learning to make use of the little dash move that I don't know the name of because I never used it in my first playthrough, but I don't know whether I could ultimately override my playstyle. Once the area is clear, we need some energy to power up the Feronis. Unfortunately, we can't use the reserve energy already in the Feronis because, in the words of a wise Nopon, the power level is at precisely 0. One introduction to ether channels later and we have rebooted the Hulk. This gets us 2 more containers, as well as a fabricator. The fabricator is a machine that I have several questions about. Mainly that it requires a payment of gold to use. Since this is a man-made machine and not a living creature, this is a bit strange as we don't really need to pay machines to do work. This implies a number of possibilities. Number 1, the machine is actually living and a functioning member of society, in which case my sincere apologies. Number 2, which is really 1.5, there is a living being inside the machine, such as a Nopon, which works 24/7 for minimal wages. But if this is the case, where does this Nopon get the items from? Option 3, which again really doesn't have to be excluded from the first 2, is that the machine is able to transform gold into the items it returns. This is really weird though, because gold is then a bit of a useless currency and also raises many questions about the fabric of the world and probably creates an existential economics and physics question, which I am not going to answer. A final, more radical option is that it is just a gameplay feature and has no real logic intended behind it. Regardless, this machine is a very welcome feature, allowing you to skip the grindy running around sections of many quests in favour of just paying money and literally spitting out items. Now that I think about it, this is really a capitalist vision. having a better alternative for yourself to use, whilst only costing you money which you have lots of. Did someone say capitalism? This kind group of Nopon heard the name of their favourite economic system and have come to make a deal. Shilshil opens up the first Nopon caravan in the game, allowing us to buy some accessories that I forgot to even look at. And to cap it all off, we get a quick scene with a now grown-up Silvercoat Ethel, who is commander of the Dirt Rank Colony 4. Still with me? Good, because we've finally reached one of the most crucial points of the run. In this next scene, Noah and friends discover that in becoming Ouroboros, they have been granted a mysterious new power that allows them to wield the weapons and classes of each other. We're forced to swap everyone to another class, but this is fine, because, for the first time in nearly 6 hours of gameplay, the run is officially legal! Everyone is using a class that they have not yet been incapacitated with. That said, we are currently locked into these classes, and there is a teensy bit more to go before we are given full freedom. On the way, we had a good character building moment, where Paean showed us how his origami mondo are really a representation of himself. Specifically, that he is as tough as a piece of paper. Paean has successfully become the first character to lose 2 classes, and we have once again technically failed the run. But at this stage, we have fully accepted that we are waiting for a miracle. Please join me in one final march towards the gang known as the Millick Pests. These 3 Bodum Gribbles are a forced battle designed to make us test out our new classes. And I can joyfully say that there were no problems and no one fell in this battle. And after the battle, we are given access to full freedom between all of the currently available classes. We've done it! We've reached the point of the game where the run finally begins, where I run out of excuses to try and continue the run. From this point onwards, the run is real. No more catches, no more continues. If we lose, we lose. I stated at the start of the video that once we reach this point, I would fully explain all of the rules and clarifications necessary. So my friends, it is finally time to wait for the next video. I know, cliffhanger, but I always knew that this was where I wanted to end the first part of this series and that the second video is where it will really begin. So if you want to try this challenge yourself with my full rule set, you'll unfortunately need to wait for the next video. That said, there are still a few things I would like to comment on in regards to the run. You may have noticed that we have struggled a bit this episode, if it wasn't obvious enough that I literally tried to personify a nameless enemy. With that in mind, I am considering whether it may be best to turn the difficulty back down from hard to normal mode. I know this removes some of the challenge, but I think this is okay. The idea of this Nuzlocke was never to be some super crazy difficult thing that no one could ever beat. It was to change the way we play the game to give us a new experience. That, and allowing me to post a hopefully entertaining video series containing some of my thoughts and comments on the game itself as we make our way through the story. I want to make a rule set that gives us a unique challenge, whilst also allowing us to make it through most, if not all, of the main story. This is made for entertainment purposes, and not for my own pain and suffering, though they may be one and the same. And there will still be an interesting problem-solving challenge in this run. I'm actually quite sure that I want to lower the difficulty, but I wanted to see other people's thoughts before I committed to it. And now, if you'll just let me comment on the video itself. Although I've posted some other videos already, this is the first video I'm really proud of and am excited to share with the world. I appreciate there are imperfections and some polish that is missing from parts of the video, but I hope I still gave you a decent time. This video took a really long time to make. I don't just mean the obvious, that editing and recording takes work, I'm actually more referring to the frequency that I worked on this. Since I don't really have an audience at the moment, the only thing I was really doing this video for was myself. And whilst that's all well and good, and we should definitely do things we have passion for, I had no idea whether any of this was actually entertaining, or whether it's a waste of my time, and there were times when I felt very demotivated about it, and just did regular old gaming. So I would genuinely appreciate if you left a comment on this video, giving your feedback, whatever that may be. I'm happy if there are criticisms you have, but I'd also love if you just talk about what worked, what was good, and what I should keep for the future. Whether that's the editing style, the narration, my gaming skill, lack of comedy, you name it. Additionally, if I know that there are people who enjoy this, then I'll have more drive and motivation to work on the next video. This video is being released towards the end of May, but the first gameplay recording dates way back to December. Now again, please bear in mind that there are a lot of empty patches where I didn't work on the video, but if I feel support behind this project, then we can hopefully eliminate some of those, and the next video can come out a bit faster. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. It's a really weird feeling to know that there are people out there in the world who will actually sit and watch you talk about video games and general gaming incompetence for nearly an hour. And just to cement myself as an officially certified YouTuber, I'm going to ask if you would kindly subscribe to the channel. Even just a couple of you would be crazy, as I don't even know any numbers above 10. Thank you for watching, and remember to avoid wishing for the endless now.